As a responsible person with growing concerns for your privacy and personal liberty, you want to know where we're headed and what you can do about it. We ask the experts what you need to do to take prudent and responsible action to safeguard your family's wealth and well-being, and what basic first steps will help you to be aware and prepared. ReluctantPreppers.com.
Welcome back, Reluctant Preppers. We have a first-time visitor today. He is an expert on the lithium industry, and particularly we're going to ask him several questions about power storage and energy storage using lithium, which is of a special interest to those of us who are interested in off-grid or living that is not dependent upon a continuous connection to outside sources for power. His name is Stefan Schauss. He's on the board of directors of Minerals Ltd. He's here with us for the first time on Reluctant Preppers. Stefan, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
We were glad that we could get you to come on the channel, and we have some questions. A lot of our viewers are interested in finding ways to reduce risk to their family's lifestyle and their well-being by becoming more independent and less reliant on what can be considered a risky or a fragile supply chain system, and otherwise pose risks to their ability to keep their houses powered and warm and that sort of thing. Many people are interested in off-grid living and being really independent from being plugged into the grid. And in that, one of the main considerations for most people is electricity and electric power and power storage. And when we start talking about power storage, in the past, people had to rely on lead-acid batteries and other older technologies that were bulky, expensive, sometimes dangerous, sometimes not having a long life, and also not having a high energy density, so where it would not be able to sufficiently power such things as refrigerators, freezers, some of the most important appliances that are important to people for off-grid living. And more recently, there's been advances in battery technology that have really seems like we're on the cusp of a revolution in energy storage, and it seems that lithium is one of the materials that's really enabling and empowering that kind of a transition to more capability. Could you talk to us about how lithium what role it's likely to play in the next several years or today in high density and safe, high capacity energy storage that people who are interested in energy independence might really benefit from?
Yeah, certainly. I'm glad that you asked this question because I think what is really one of the key elements in what today's lithium battery technology can bring to the table is exactly as you were questioning. Traditional methods of batteries, particularly in the off-grid environment or in a remote location environment, have always been some sort of almost like a commodity type in the way of use a few times and then they're worn out and you have to replace them and so on. When you look at lithium technology, and particularly lithium cells as they are coming in several variants, but the real prime future will probably be the lithium nickel manganese cobalt variation, or NMC variation, and these devices have been really on the forefront when it comes to low degradation, almost in an environment where they're used with a one charge discharge cycle per day. They have been really on the prime market and availability. When you look at today's battery vendors and system vendors, they have been using exclusively lithium batteries in new installations simply because they overcome the lack of longevity in the old days, and lithium devices have come a long way too. This is driven by the electric vehicle market, because that's where big volumes are coming. But you see that there's a general trend to decentralization of power supplies, driven by solar, by wind, renewable power generation, which now enables to overcome their intermittency efficiency with batteries. And so the acceptance level has risen by far. And hence the prices came down. And now we can say that for remote locations, the price levels are already there where it makes sense to deploy a solar plus storage system with, let's say, a 16-hour battery discharge cycle. And this is all suitable for lithium batteries as we see them for power as alternative power supply with a good energy density without having massive installations and massive care, because these are maintenance free more or less, besides maybe the annual undusting of any kind of dust that settles on them. So a perfect scenario really, and so on. So the use for these devices in remote application, as we call them, or independent power supplies, has been driven already. We see that a lot often these days after a disaster happened, like Puerto Rico, for example, yes, where a massive has been deployed afterwards. Great scenario, really fantastic, because it is really independent. So when the power line goes down, you still have power. You're the one enjoying the radio broadcast and everything there is. The refrigerators, you don't spoil the food. You can preserve it even when the supply on new food is disrupted. So that makes a lot of sense. In Africa, for example, we have I in my past have installed a few systems there. This makes even more sense because there was never a power infrastructure, and now you can bring that to communities where a simple light in the dark helps fight analphabetism, let people read, education, and so bettering the future. This is a big aspect of this.
It's interesting that you mentioned Puerto Rico because most people are aware they had a major countrywide power, their infrastructure nearly destroyed by hurricane last year, and they're still in the process of rebuilding and restoring. They've got a long way to go. But actually our Reluctant Preppers crew is going to be visiting Puerto Rico in the next couple of weeks and trying to visit and talk to some people about how they've been weathering literally life without power and what kind of adaptations they've had to do. But as you pointed out, those who were prepared with systems that allowed them to do energy storage were well ahead of the average person. Quick question, because you did mention, we wanted to ask you, you mentioned both solar and wind as potential recharging sources of energy. And again, to remind people that battery technology is not a power source. It's simply a way of storing power that you still have to have a source. And as technology advances have been continuing to happen both in the solar and wind area, what trade-offs do you see there for the capacity? And there's several questions that all come together. One is the amount, you mentioned care. It sounds like from a maintenance standpoint, there's almost no maintenance with lithium batteries. From a compact energy density storage for a small home where people are interested in maybe a refrigerator and freezer, possibly a fan that has to work for their furnace to be able to heat if they need it, or lights or radio. The size of energy density that they can get into lithium batteries, what is a general range of size that they need to think of in terms of physical space that they need to provide for a lithium battery bank that could support a typical residential home?
Sure. I'd love to talk a little bit about sizes. I mean, you have tailor-made products in the market which are grouped together because even a battery itself requires some power electronics to regulate the power. It's not just you clamp on a DC battery and then out comes a nice 110 volt or 120 volt AC current for your refrigerator. Typically what you have is you have some power conversion systems built in, and there are all kinds of setups. I don't want to go so much into it, but what it allows is basically controlling the mix of power generation with the battery. So the battery is always there as a buffer in order to make it a nice, smooth sine curve supply, so that no computer or no light bulb gets a hiccup or breaks. But these packs typically are in the size of I would say a freezer, maybe a half a freezer even. It depends a little bit on the power draw you have. When you're also heating the swimming pool at the same time, then probably that would require maybe 2 of those units. But in overall, it's very compact. It's very, very light on the space requirements, and it can fit into the garage. It can fit into a basement as long as you have a basement, and it can be installed pretty much everywhere. Now, when you look at Tesla with the Powerwall,
yes.
Well, it's a wall-hung unit, right? That's why it's called the Powerwall.
Correct.
So very, very dense system. It is for a good, let's say, smaller home. When the square footage becomes larger, you probably need 2 of them, or maybe in some cases 3 of them. That depends simply on the house size you have and the amount of power you're drawing over the course of the day. But generally, you can say, well, a freezer size will get you minimum 24 hours, up to 48 hours of independent supply out of the battery. And particularly when you think of off-grid systems, you want to have that extra little reserve, let's say, for the odd day that, for example, your solar system on the roof is not really performing that well due to cloud coverage or something like
right.
this. Those are all elements to be considered. However, your installer from next door will definitely be able to advise on the right sizing of this. Yeah.
A related question, since we're talking about multiple sources of energy, like wind and solar and even grid, is it necessary to have separation of battery banks for each of those different sources, or can they be combined?
No, they can all be combined. They're all basically on one big grid node, I shall say. Yeah, so one big node. The solar system comes in on one side. There's the storage system comes in on the other side. And typically, when you think of off-grid systems, you want to have a backup generator still. But unlike in current cases, where let's say the backup generator is the main power source and then it runs 24/7, you shift that, and that's a paradigm shift. Yeah, the diesel genset you probably have installed maybe already on your in your place should remain there and should be utilized for, instead of 100% of the time, now all in a sudden for 20% or maybe even 15% of the time. When you combine it with other renewable sources of power generation like solar or even wind. The main source of a carbon-free power supply is what drives definitely a lot of these installments as well. And when you think again on disaster relief, one big problem is to get fuel for your diesel genset in a disaster case. The supply lines are interrupted. It might be that either you have take precautionary measures and you have several weeks of fuel already on site. That's a big storage area. Or alternatively, you cut it down to 20% or 10% of your usage by installing energy storage plus than any other renewable source.
Another question people have is about shifting their power consumption to low off-peak rate times, because in many communities with increased demand for power, the power rates available on grid from the utility company are not level throughout the day, but they come to sometimes a very increased rate at peak load times, such as in the late afternoon, early evening hours when everyone's wanting to use the air conditioning, that sort of thing. So with energy storage, people, I understand, can shift sometimes if they're going to replenish their batteries from on-grid connected supplies, they can sometimes get that power replenished at an off-peak low rate time, and then consume the energy whenever they need to. Is that one of the benefits as well?
This is, so before we talked about off-grid systems, when we talk about on-grid consumption or we call it behind-the-meter applications, energy storage makes a lot of sense across the U.S., some parts in Canada, across the world. Whenever you have peak rate charges, then with energy storage, of course, you can displace that without changing your consumption behavior, because you're simply offsetting it. The lowest cost means, let's say, would be if I can shift a load into the dispatch of a load into an off-peak season, I can save money. But with the added expense of, let's say, an energy storage system, I can cut that down even far more dramatically. In California, for example, in the afternoon hour, when you have time of use rate on your tariff, that you're procuring from a power supply. Forget solar in that game. Even just energy storage, you charge it up in off-peak times, and then you dispatch that stored energy into the peak hours. That is a business case, but with today's lithium prices already making sense and providing a huge cost benefit, a huge savings benefit. Typically you get amortization periods of 3 to 4 years in some cases. In other cases, it might be 5, 6, but it definitely way before you see any kind of end of life on an energy storage system.
So what you're pointing out there, just so we understand correctly, is that for people who are considering putting in a battery storage system, even if they're in a grid connected location, don't have solar, don't have wind, don't have a generator, but just want to be able to shift their consumption of power to off-peak hours, if they're in a location or a jurisdiction where they do have off-peak premiums or savings that they can make, sometimes they can get a 4 to 5 year payback on their investment in a battery storage system just for putting that in. And
correct.
Ironically, they would get the benefit of having resilient power available if there was a disaster, if there was a weather event or something that knocked out the power. They, just as though they had a generator, they would have some backup capacity then as well.
Typically the systems are implemented in such a way that they take over the power supply for the power outage as long as they until they run empty, right? That's a sizing question again.
Sure.
What people want, but yes, definitely this can be done. It's like your uninterruptible power supply you typically know from your computer. Well, even your notebooks run. They run through any kind of power outages, while the rest of the system is probably down, and you can still enjoy your favorite movie or whatever.
We were actually in the middle of an interview with one of our guests, Dr. David T. Bradley. He's a NASA scientist. We were talking about emergency preparedness, and we had a storm, knocked out the power, but because we were doing our recording on a laptop and we had a backup UPS on our network system, we just kept right on going along without a glitch. It was a great experience. Hey, I wanted to circle back on a question you had touched on briefly. You mentioned that some of the economies that have been possible in the lithium-driven energy storage market recently have been driven by electric vehicles or e-vehicles, and the demand for that has been just astronomical in the past decade. We've seen such an increase, starting perhaps with the Toyota came out with their electric vehicle Prius, and others have followed suit as well. Major manufacturers, now most manufacturers offering electric vehicles. So with this worldwide demand, what countries, as far as the lithium availability, have been able to dominate the supply of lithium that's going to meet that burgeoning demand? And should people be concerned as they're looking at getting an energy storage system perhaps for their home that they should act quickly because the supply is running out? Or how is the global supply of lithium doing, and where is it coming from?
Sure. I mean, this is exactly what I'm representing in this conversation here. We at Wealth Minerals, we are a junior mining company who has collected and assembled one of the lowest cost potential for lithium supplies into the supply chain for batteries, be it for electric vehicles, be it for stationary, any type of stationary energy storage system, all the way up to consumer products. What has been in the past the lowest cost environment for lithium, where also 35% of the lithium world supply comes from, is down in Chile. This is where the highest concentration of lithium is available for exploitation. Currently, this is done in Chile at the Atacama Salar. And we at Wealth Minerals, we have a property there where we start drilling in a few weeks from now. Actually, and we should have results in mid to late summer. The Atacama Salar has estimated the largest deposit in the world on lithium, and it is a brine type lithium. I don't know whether you're familiar with it. Brine is basically it's a soup, right? So you have salts and lithium salts, dissolved or not dissolved, but in water. And in the substance. So what you're doing is the extraction is very easy, because you pump that brine to the surface. And because Atacama Salar is a desert, so there's very low humidity. And just by bringing it up to the surface, the liquid is evaporating, and what remains as a result is lithium. And then you carbonate it, or you hydrolyze it, and so that allows for a very low cost supply of lithium. And the area there, what we have is 47,000 hectares. So the depths in which lithium is found is around about 50 to 70 meters. So we're not talking, big mining operation in that sense, where you have to go 1,000 meters deep. Also, the Atacama Salar is believed, and we, based on historical measures that others have done, to be around about 1,000 to 1,400 meters deep. That said, means there's an abundance of lithium supply. So from the lithium supply side, we can definitely help that the lithium will not go out. Where we do see certainly currently an element is because of the high demand that's going on in coming from electric vehicle car consumption. And right. Believe me, when we say that, we haven't even touched or scratched the surface yet. What the future demand will be. You have to see that. Let's maybe first talk about production capabilities for lithium batteries. Current production capability is estimated somewhere in the vicinity of 25 to 35 gigawatt hours equivalent. And that's the energy that each cell can hold up, and that's summarized over all the production capacity there is. The future demand is for for electric vehicles will probably be 300 to 500 times that. So a massive increase as we expect as electric vehicles become more and more mainstream and more automobile manufacturers are switching to full electric vehicles over the next 2 to 5 years. With their car fleets, with their products they're building, and that will increase. This will increase the demand even further. At the same time, we have energy storage as a stationary variation, also picking up demand left, right, and center. We see a doubling every year these days, and so the demand will definitely be there. But at the same time, Wells Minerals is in the position to help this and to supply lithium in abundance for the sizing of the industry to go forward.
That's what I was going to ask. You mentioned, so if I understood correctly, there is, we believe, an abundance of lithium available. It's mostly the largest deposit, sounds like, is in Chile, and you're playing a role there and expect that to grow. We're wondering about, in the industry of providing that resource, if there are companies. It sounds like this is going to be a real high growth area, and what companies that are producing lithium are considered pure plays, and that is like their main form of business is going to be in lithium, rather than that's just one aspect of other mining operations that they've got going on.
That's a very good question. So what we have to say is that right now there are relatively few players in the market that are true pure play lithium producers for offtake markets. When you look at the large ones that are currently in the Atacama as offtake clients from Corfu, the state-owned company, handing out exploitation rights or exploiting it and then delivering to companies like FMC, SQM, Albemarle. These companies, of course, they have a mixed portfolio. And then you, on the Chinese side, you have Tianqi and a few others that are looking or that are working in the lithium space. But Wells, in contrast, for example, is a pure play lithium. And besides, one project, the company has 4 projects, and 3 are on the way right now, where we have drilling going on in the coming weeks, and where we start this so that we have a much better read on this. But Wells Minerals is definitely one of the pure play companies going forward. And there are some other players in the market that are performing in that space, more or less successful. When it boils down to and it comes to a selection of players, then it's not just about pure play, but it's also about lithium projects that each company has in their portfolio. There's some Argentinian projects which probably will not be as lucrative as the Chilean projects that are currently in production or underway. And then there are a few others, but the cost for producing lithium carbonate or lithium hydroxide is by far not as advanced, and this will add to the cost of producing this lithium, which will probably in a fast-growing demand market, this works well. When it comes to a stable, let's say, throughput in the manufacturing or in the offtake side of lithium, then it will be becoming imminent to have a low-cost supply of lithium in your portfolio. Yeah.
And in that regards, in some of the reading that I was doing about your company, it sounds like that there are several things that could result in real game-changing differences in the recognition by the markets of the company's value and and return to some valuations that would reflect that. Could you just touch briefly, I know our time is short, but if you could just touch briefly on what some of these game-changing developments could be or expected to be, and anything that's happened recently that people need to be aware of.
Yeah. As a first point, I would like to mention that unlike other companies, we're not we don't need a license to exploit this. We already have come to an agreement with the state agency ENAMI. For the exploitation of strategic minerals, as it is in Chile. Lithium is a strategic mineral. So ENAMI has teamed up with Wells Minerals, which means that particularly we have a free way forward in the exploitation phase to deliver lithium to the marketplace without going through chains of supply side, and we can market it basically to producers of batteries directly. The second thing is that we have also we took a very ethical stand on the mining side, as it has been proclaimed, for a worldwide global mining standard. We don't want to be the bad guys. We are definitely. It is very easy to apply rules to the way you exploit a mineral out of the ground, and so we also. Are working together with the Chileans to make sure that it is that we understand that they have some property surrounding our projects, and that we don't want to disturb the way that these communities are working. So we take very good care of the surrounding of the environmental aspect of lithium mining.
If people want to follow more of Wealth Minerals' progress, what ticker symbol should they watch for?
This is WML on the Toronto Stock Exchange.
And things that you think might be coming in the future that would send the stock price higher. What kind of things would be like the kind of events that you're looking for that would say, yep, that's probably going to trigger some significant movement in understood valuation by the markets?
Yeah, so I mean, when you compare to other players in that market and the evaluation that other companies have received, so I think the real trigger point right now will be over the next couple weeks, let's say months, but very soon you will see in midsummer you will see the results from our drilling operation, so where we can size the project. We believe that this will be a true game changer for us. We believe that we will have multiples in gains of the stock price, simply because now we can size the opportunity, and based on our three imminent projects, that's the Atacama Solar, today the worldwide largest supply of lithium from a single site, the Trinity project, which is a sandbox first-class rated lithium supply, and Laguna Verde, which is yet another one. All three we will be drilling, and we will be understanding what the magnitude is of our supply. We have first estimates and historical estimates where we believe that this is a very high grade, and it will definitely be in one of the densest lithium supplies around the globe.
Well, we've been talking with Stefan Schauss. He's on the board of directors of Wealth Minerals Ltd, talking to us about lithium and especially its applications in the energy storage area, which is of extreme interest to those who are wanting to live independently. And even those who want to just reduce the cost of their energy by shifting their energy source to a lower cost supply. And Stefan, there's so many questions that people are going to have, some about the solar or wind or storage or off-grid or peak shifting questions. They'll probably be submitting questions along those lines underneath this video, and we would love to have you back when we can to address more of those. Just thank you so much for joining us here even this short time on Reluctant Preppers.
Thank you so much, Dunagun. It was a pleasure.